Well, now you jump forward, to 1968, and you've got a perfect opportunity. And, we all know what happened to Bobby in the kitchen pantry of the Ambassador Hotel.
Right, exactly
You
right.
know,
And there was also footage that showed Morales was in the crowd. Now, there's some
bingo.
debate about that, but
Right.
it did really look like him. Maybe he's a
Yes.
big, burly, mean-looking
Yep.
dude. And
Yep.
when you saw him, he is in the back. It's when the right after the assassination happened, and you see him walking in the back of
Yep.
the crowd. That was
Yep.
fascinating bit
Yeah.
there too.
That's a real big, eye opener. So yeah, that was some of the stuff that really fascinated me. And of course, backing up a second and talking about the JFK and the RFK interconnectedness, yes, I reference the Paines as well. I reference Oswald a fair amount in my book as well. Um, but I also want to make it clear that in writing my book, I did not in any way seek to exonerate Oswald or Sirhan. But
Right,
I'm not gonna talk so much about Oswald because that's your territory. But
right,
Sirhan, you know, I Sirhan's in jail for a reason. And he did shoot. He fired 8 shots at Kennedy, at Bobby Kennedy. I just don't believe that he fired the shot that killed Bobby Kennedy. But
right.
he's guilty of trying to kill him. Now you can say, well, was he a Manchurian candidate? Was he, in an altered state? Was he not culpable? These are all kinds of questions that can be asked and that have been asked. But
Mm,
ultimately, he was, and he even said it himself. I even quote that in my book. He says, I am guilty of being there. Well, so there's a reason that Gavin Newsom is not going to release him. Now, I say Gavin Newsom because the parole board recently, the latest meeting of the parole board did vote to release Sirhan from prison, but
right.
it takes the governor signing off on it, and Gavin Newsom won't sign off on it. And
I can't blame him.
right, I agree 100%. I fully support Governor Newsom's position on that because
Right.
this is a dangerous dude, you
Yeah.
know, and he was involved in this, and so that's my little tangent. I wanted to make it clear because I actually had somebody say to me recently when because my book just came out this week, and I had somebody say, "Well, you should send a copy to Sirhan and get his reaction." And I said, I don't want to honor or moderize him in any way.
Right.
Um, I believe he's a criminal. I believe he was involved in something heinous. I just
Right.
don't believe he was the only one.
Right. Yeah. And
So I'm not
that's where
interested in that.
right. I
You know,
agree. Yeah. And I'm the same way with Oswald. I personally, my research, I don't think he did it, but he was certainly involved. And
right,
I do think he was a patsy, but, was he completely innocent? Did they just pin this on him? I don't believe that at all.
right.
And I don't think anybody who's serious can say that he was completely innocent.
That's
When you
right.
when you swim in this water, and people do for a variety of reasons, you're going to get some oil on you. And that's what I
Absolutely.
think happened with these. Because when you look at the Sirhan evidence that they got from his room afterwards, he had a lot of crazy writings. I mean, and there's a lot of explanations for that he may have
Yep.
been part of mind control. But it's just, and that I know that has happened. I don't know if that's the case here, but it's definitely the kind of guy you don't want to have walking around the street or seeing in a mall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These guys were involved in various levels, and I actually, in my book, in the lead up to the RFK assassination, I show Sirhan being involved with these nefarious characters, and I do take the Manchurian candidate theory seriously. I know it comes across. It's when you first look at it, it sounds like a ludicrous theory,
Sure.
but there's reason to believe it, and from as a crime investigator and an historian, it does pass the plausibility test.
It
Um,
does.
and so that's why I've taken it seriously. And when you look at it from the Bobby Kennedy situation, my take on that is, I don't want to reveal too much of my story, but
Right. Yeah. But
my take on it is the people, the puppet masters, if you will, the string pullers. I think that they believed that they kind of messed up when with the first time around with Oswald, because now
Right.
Oswald, they silenced Oswald, which only led to more speculation. Was Ruby involved? Then people are looking at Ruby, and they're looking at all these interconnectedness there, and then they look at the pains and they pull in all that. So I think that they figured, and this is the take I had on it, that this time around, what if we keep the assassin alive?
Right.
But what if he doesn't have a memory of it? What if, everybody can say, look, he's still here. He's the one that did it. And that would shift the blame. So all the blame is going to be on him because he's still there, and they can make sure they can punish him to the full extent of the law, and all the researchers can point it all right at him because he's still here.
Right.
As opposed to bumping him off the way that things happen with Oswald.
Right.
So when you look at it from that angle, a Manchurian Candidate, which if you accept that it is a real possibility, then it becomes more plausible. What if
Right.
you can erase, what if you can program somebody to commit such a heinous act and then they have no memory of it?
Right. And they were playing around with stuff like that. That's actual
Absolutely.
record. They were doing that with LSD, the Wormwood Project. There was an
MK
awful lot.
Ultra.
MK Ultra. There were a lot of things that were going on back then
Yeah.
where they were trying to play with the psyche for the purposes of having a super soldier to help with, to
Yep.
make them more effective. And
That's
so,
right.
it's definitely, so when you see that and you don't dismiss it as just a wild theory, there's actual evidence of it. It definitely becomes far more plausible and
Right.
actually terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was able to find actual doctors that were involved in doing it, working for the CIA, and I was able to make a connection between Sirhan. There's the whole concept of chain of custody,
Right.
with a crime, and I was able to do a chain of custody thing for Sirhan, and I was able to connect figures who knew him, who were able to bring him right to a CIA doctor who actually is on record for having been involved with the MK Ultra program and in brainwashing and programming these people. And then and again, I want to reiterate for the viewers that it's not so far-fetched, because there have been cases, and I document that in the book as well, where people have been convicted as for programming people to kill somebody.
Hmm.
And then, of course, you have the most famous case of Charles Manson.
Right.
Charles Manson didn't kill those people physically, but he certainly programmed his followers to do it.
Yeah,
And
through
he
a
was
variety
convicted
of
of that.
drugs, and through a variety of drugs and influence
Right.
and everything else. That
That's right.
doctor, was that Honey West, or what was his name? I
It
didn't
was
wasn't he white?
he was now I've run through so many. It's going to come to me in a second. It was oh shoot, I got it. Oh damn it! He has the same name as the candidate who in the Scopes trial, the lawyer in the Scopes trial, Brian William
Brian.
Jennings
Okay.
Bryan. This
Okay.
guy was he was a descendant of William Jennings Bryan. So
Oh, really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
he
Wow,
was the
that's
one.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah,
fascinating. Wow, I did
yeah.
not know that.
Oh,
I did not know.
he was a advisor to the film The Manchurian Candidate, the one with Frank Sinatra. He openly bragged about that. He was there are records of him working with the U.S. Navy during the Korean War on this
Yes.
Manchurian Candidate situation, and he opened up a practice in Southern California. And I was able to tie him directly to Sirhan, having visited him. And it's like,
Wow.
there's a lot of stuff.
And it's all right there. It doesn't require a lot of
Yeah,
extrapolation. And
right.
it's funny. Recently, I know that there was a couple of years ago, there was a big outcry when they said the LAPD is destroying all the evidence in the RFK
Right.
assassination.
Right.
They're getting rid of it. And they said, but in their defense, they said, we've had it for 35 years.
Right.
It's been looked at, it's photographed,
Right.
it's scanned. We just literally don't have room for this stuff anymore, because they
Yes.
took whole sections of door and floor
Yeah.
and ceiling.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it's funny how, yeah, you could, and there were certainly officers that were involved in the detectives in the questioning of people who were on the LAPD who had some interesting backgrounds. But when it comes to stuff like that, after 35 years, They're not
Right.
actively covering up physical evidence.
Right.
There's a reason why they can only keep this stuff for so long. There's
Right.
practicality that has to come in.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
but I
Yeah.
see in a
And
generation or so people saying, "Oh, they destroyed the evidence," and then you say, "Nah, it was." Yeah, in 15 years, it might not seem like a lot of time, but 35 years is a hell of a lot of time to keep
oh
this
yeah.
stuff around.
Yeah. And how long do you hold it? I mean, you're right. But you know, the conspiracy stuff will go on forever when you're talking about these notable figures that were bumped off.
Right,
And yeah, you know, and especially with Sirhan still sitting in jail, you
right,
know, yeah, there's all that stuff that is at play here. And then you know, I go into all that stuff with the police, whether they were involved, whether they were not involved, you know, the level of their attention to the JFK thing. I mean, excuse me, to the RFK thing. You
right.
know, yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
Right. And it's always great to encourage people not to take your word for it or my word for it. Do your own research. There's a
Right,
great YouTube channel called America's Untold Stories with Mark Robert. And he goes into all of these things and these theories, the interconnectedness, and he openly says, don't take my word for it. Do your own research.
right,
Maybe you'll find something I forgot. Maybe you'll
right.
see a connection I didn't. But he approaches it from a journalist's standpoint, and he lays it out so beautifully. And I think that's the great part about looking into this stuff, because once you do your own research, it becomes incredibly rewarding, and it can lead to something like the book that you wrote.
Right. And that leads me, you know, full circle back to what I said about my dad. You know, my dad's generation, they turned a blind eye to that stuff. They closed the possibility off in their mind. Because I remember
Mm-hmm.
the first time I mentioned this Manchurian candidate concept to my dad, he immediately dismissed it as ludicrous. You know, oh
Right.
yeah, that's just fantasy. That's the kind of stuff you'd see in a movie. But I'm like, no, it's plausible. It's entirely plausible, and I have research to back up the fact that it was an active policy of the certain elements of the government to create this, you know. And but I think his generation, you know, a lot of people, not certainly not all of them, but many people of his generation or like him do not want to know this stuff. But our generation, who are now removed from the emotional connection that the others had to these people, can look at it more objectively and look at where the facts lead us and say, okay, I'm going to be open to whatever possibility as long as the facts are there to substantiate it.
Right, right. You can look at it with a more analytical eye. And also, too, when
Right.
you have people who were in that generation and were alive back then when it happened, they had immediate memory, if you will, of the Great Depression, coming out of
Right.
that. Their parents came through it. Their parents came out of World War II. Then they were in school in the 50s and 60s when there was the good government approach, because government back then had a really good track record.
Yes.
They were told it stopped the Great Depression. It pulled us out of poverty. We won the war. We
Right.
won the peace. And so I can understand the reluctance in looking at it and wanting to consider something like that. But as you said, the charm of distance is to be able to look at this stuff with a critical eye, which you have certainly done. And I applaud you for that.
And you too, my friend.
Thank you, pal. So where can people find the girl in the polka dot dress?
Yeah. Let me
Show
do
the
a
pic.
little shameless plug here.
Please do. That's what it's about.
Here's a copy of it. I guess that's the girl in the polka dot dress. That's
Great
this.
cover.
This. Thank you so much. And there are several places they can find it. The best place, of course, is the behemoth called Amazon.
Right.
So they can just easily find it on Amazon. You can go to my website. You can also my website is guycodybooks.com. And you can also go to my publisher's website, World Castle Publishing, and it's available there. But the easiest way is like I said, through Amazon. It's in certain bookstores, but it's not carried nationwide. You know, but the best place is Amazon.
And if they want it through their library, they can certainly ask the librarian to order it, and they can do that as well.
Absolutely. In fact, I encourage people to do that. That way, the more people reading this, the better. I love to have